What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly conversation, only to face an ambush that crosses every line of professional respect? In just 38 seconds, a simple question about his career choices would ignite a firestorm that brought an entire studio to stunned silence and ended with cameras still rolling as one of cinema's biggest names stormed off set, leaving behind a host whose smug expression finally cracked into pure shock. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studio. Kevin Costner sat in the guest chair, relaxed and ready to talk about his latest project. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and across from him sat Lara Spencer, flanked by Michael Strahan and Robin Roberts at the desk. Everything seemed normal, everything seemed fine, but what was about to unfold would become one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. "So Kevin, let's talk about your new series," Lara began, her smile wide but her eyes cold. "You've been doing a lot of television lately. Is this because the movie offers just aren't coming in anymore?" The studio went quiet. Michael shifted in his seat. Robin's smile faltered. Kevin blinked, processing what he'd just heard. "I'm sorry, what?" Kevin asked, his voice measured, but you could hear the edge creeping in. "Well, Lara continued, leaning back in her chair like she owned the place. "You used to be in these big blockbuster films, Dances with Wolves, The Bodyguard, Field of Dreams, and now you're doing television. Some people might see that as a step down. Are you okay with that?" Michael tried to cut in. "Actually, television has become—" "I'm talking to Kevin," Lara snapped, holding up her hand without even looking at Michael. Her eyes stayed locked on Kevin, waiting for him to squirm. Kevin sat up straighter. "Television isn't a step down from anything. Some of the best storytelling happening right now is on television. Have you actually watched anything recent, or are you still stuck in 1990? A few crew members behind the cameras let out quiet chuckles. Lara's smile tightened. "That's a bit defensive, don't you think?" she shot back. "I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. When actors go to TV, it's usually because they can't get movie roles anymore." Robin jumped in quickly. "Kevin, I think what we're trying to say is that you're bringing such incredible talent to the small screen, and—" "No, that's not what I'm saying at all," Lara interrupted, cutting Robin off mid-sentence. "I'm saying what I mean. Kevin, your last 3 movies didn't do well at the box office. The numbers don't lie. So is television a backup plan, or are you just trying to stay relevant?" The air in the studio turned ice cold. You could hear someone drop a pin in the back. Michael put his hand over his face. Robin looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Kevin stared at Lara for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger simmering underneath. "Are you seriously asking me this? Are you seriously sitting there, on national television, questioning my relevance? I'm a journalist," Lara said with a shrug. "I ask tough questions. If you can't handle that, maybe morning television isn't for you." "Maybe morning television isn't for me?" Kevin repeated slowly. "Let me tell you something about relevance. I've been making films for over 40 years. I've won Oscars. I've created stories that people still watch and love decades later. What have you done besides sit in that chair and tear people down to make yourself feel important?" Lara's face flushed red. "Excuse me? You heard me," Kevin continued, his voice rising now. "You bring me on this show, you tell me we're going to have a conversation about my work, and instead you ambush me with this disrespectful garbage. You want to talk about the box office? Let's talk about respect. Let's talk about basic human decency." "Kevin, I think we should." Robin tried again, her voice gentle. "No, let him talk," Lara said, her arms crossed now. "Clearly he has feelings about this." "Feelings?" Kevin let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah, I have feelings about being disrespected by someone who clearly doesn't understand the first thing about making art. You think success is just about box office numbers? You think relevance is measured by how much money something makes on opening weekend? In this industry, yes." Lara fired back. "That's literally how it works." Michael finally found his voice. "Lara, maybe we should move on to—" "Stay out of this, Michael," Lara snapped again. She turned back to Kevin. "Look, I'm sorry if the truth hurts, but someone needs to say it. You're not the star you used to be. You're doing TV now. That's just a fact." Kevin stood up. The sudden movement made everyone freeze. "What's a fact?" Kevin said, his voice quiet now, but somehow more powerful. The fact that you're so insecure in your own position that you have to try to make guests feel small. The fact that you think being rude is the same thing as being a good interviewer. The fact that everyone in this studio right now is embarrassed for you, but you're too busy being smug to notice. Sit down, Lara ordered, pointing at the chair. We're in the middle of a segment. No, Kevin said simply. I'm done here. You can't just leave, Lara said, her voice getting higher. You signed on to do this interview. Watch me, Kevin replied. He started to remove his microphone. Robin stood up from the desk. Kevin, please, we can talk about something else. Lara, maybe we should. Don't apologize for me, Lara cut her off. I didn't do anything wrong. He's being unprofessional. Kevin stopped and turned back to face her. I'm being unprofessional? You invited me here as a guest. In my world, that means you treat people with respect. You don't ambush them. You don't insult their career. You don't try to embarrass them on live television. I'm doing my job, Lara insisted. Your job is to be cruel? Kevin asked. Your job is to make people uncomfortable? Because if that's what you think journalism is, you're in the wrong profession. Michael stood up now too. Kevin's right. This got out of hand. Lara, you went too far. Lara whipped around to face Michael. Oh, so now you're taking his side? I'm not taking anyone's side, Michael said carefully. I'm saying this interview went off the rails and we need to. We need to what? Lara demanded. Baby him? Pretend like his career isn't sliding? I'm the only one here willing to ask real questions. Real questions? Robin's voice was sharp now, sharper than anyone had ever heard her. You're not asking questions, Lara. You're attacking him. I'm being honest, Lara shot back. Kevin had his microphone off now. He laid it carefully on the chair. You want honesty? Here's honesty. You're a bully. You hide behind this desk and this show, and you think that gives you permission to treat people however you want, but it doesn't. And I'm not going to stand here and let you do it. Then leave, Lara said, waving her hand dismissively. Run away. That's what people do when they can't handle the heat. This isn't heat, Kevin said. This is just you being mean for no reason. There's a difference. He started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him. You could hear the producers in the control room frantically talking through everyone's earpieces. Kevin, wait, Robin called out, leaving the desk to follow him. Please, just give us a minute. Kevin stopped and turned to face Robin. His expression softened when he looked at her. Robin, you're a class act. You've always been a class act. But I can't do this. I won't sit there and be insulted by someone who clearly has no respect for what I do, or who I am. I understand, Robin said quietly. I'm so sorry this happened. It's not your fault, Kevin told her. He glanced at Michael. Or yours. You both tried to stop it. Lara stood up from behind the desk now. Are you seriously going to let him make me the villain here? He came on this show with an attitude from the start. That's not true and you know it, Michael said, his voice firm. He was fine until you started attacking him. I didn't attack anyone, Lara protested. I asked legitimate questions about his career trajectory. You questioned his relevance, Robin said, her voice still calm, but her words pointed. You implied he was washed up. You were condescending and rude. That's not journalism, Lara. That's just mean. Oh, so now everyone's against me? Lara's voice went up another notch. I'm trying to make good television, and you're all acting like I committed a crime. Good television isn't making your guests feel attacked, Michael said. Good television is having a real conversation. Kevin had reached the edge of the set now. A producer tried to stop him, but he gently moved past her. Kevin, please, the producer said. We can fix this. We can reshoot. There's nothing to fix, Kevin said. She showed everyone exactly who she is. I'm just choosing not to participate in it anymore. Lara's voice carried across the studio. Fine, leave. See if anyone cares. Your career's been over for years anyway. The entire room went silent. Even the crew members who had been moving around stopped. Michael's mouth dropped open. Robin closed her eyes like she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Kevin turned slowly. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked disappointed. There it is. That's what you really think. You know what, Lara? I actually feel sorry for you. Because you're so caught up in ratings and making moments that you forgot how to be a decent human being. Don't you dare feel sorry for me, Lara spat out. I'm successful. I'm on national television every morning. I have a career. You have a job, Kevin corrected. There's a difference. A career is built on respect and relationships and creating something meaningful. A job is just showing up and collecting a paycheck. And right now, that's all you're doing." He turned to leave again. This time, he didn't stop. "You're making a mistake," Lara called after him. "You walk out that door and you'll never work with this network again." Kevin paused at the exit. Without turning around, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "If this is how your network treats guests, I don't want to work with you again." And then he was gone. The studio doors closed behind him with a heavy thud. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The cameras were still rolling, but there was nothing to film except the aftermath of what had just happened. Robin walked back to the desk slowly. She sat down and looked directly at the camera. "We're going to take a commercial break." "We can't just," Lara started. "Yes, we can," Robin said firmly. "We need a break. Now." Michael sat down too, not looking at Lara. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "I can't believe you two," Lara said, her voice shaking now. "He was the one who got aggressive. He was the one who lost his temper." "He lost his temper because you pushed him to it," Michael said quietly. "You kept pushing and pushing until he snapped. What did you think was going to happen?" "I thought we'd have an interesting conversation," Lara said, but her voice wasn't as strong anymore. "I thought he could handle a few tough questions." "Those weren't tough questions," Robin said, looking at her directly. "Those were insults disguised as questions. There's a difference, and you know it." A producer rushed onto the set, headphones on, clipboard in hand. "We're going to commercial in 30 seconds. When we come back, we're moving to the weather segment. Lara, you're off camera for the rest of the show." "You can't do that," Lara protested. "I'm a host." "You can't just—" "It's already decided," the producer said. "We'll talk about this later. Right now, we need to get through the rest of the show." The producer walked away. Lara stood there, looking at Robin and Michael like she expected them to defend her. Neither of them said a word. 10 seconds, someone called out. Robin took a deep breath and straightened her papers. Michael cleared his throat. Lara slowly sat back down, her face red, her hands shaking slightly. 5, 4, 3. The cameras went live again. Robin smiled at the camera like nothing had happened. "Welcome back to Good Morning America. Let's check in with our weather team." Backstage, Kevin was already in the parking lot. His manager was on the phone, already dealing with the fallout. But Kevin didn't look stressed. He looked relieved. Back in the studio, Lara sat at the desk, off camera, watching as Robin and Michael carried on with the show without her. For the first time that morning, she was quiet. She wasn't smiling anymore. She wasn't making snarky comments. She just sat there, realizing that maybe, just maybe, she had gone too far. The rest of the show continued without incident. Robin and Michael were professional as always. They didn't mention what had happened. They didn't apologize on air. They just did their jobs. But everyone watching at home had seen it. Everyone in the studio had witnessed it. And everyone knew that something had shifted. You can't unring a bell. You can't take back words once they're spoken on live television. In those 38 seconds when Lara asked that first insulting question, she had set off a chain reaction that nobody could stop. She had pushed a respected actor, a Hollywood legend, past his breaking point. And in doing so, she had revealed something about herself that no amount of backtracking could hide. Kevin Costner had walked onto that set as a guest. He had come prepared to have a friendly conversation about his work. He had expected to be treated with basic respect. Instead, he got ambushed. He got insulted. He got disrespected, and so he left. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes, refusing to participate in someone else's cruelty is the strongest statement you can make. The cameras had captured every moment, every word, every expression, the tension building, the arguments escalating. The final breaking point when Kevin decided he'd had enough. Viewers watching at home were shocked. Social media exploded within minutes. People couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. A morning talk show, usually so cheerful and light, had turned into a battleground, and at the center of it all was Lara, who had pushed and pushed until she pushed too far. Back at the desk, she sat in silence. The confident smirk was gone. The sharp tongue was quiet. For the first time that morning, she wasn't in control. Robin and Michael exchanged glances as they read from the teleprompter. They were professionals. They would get through this. But things would never be quite the same, because everyone had seen what happened when someone finally stood up to Lara Spencer. Everyone had watched as Kevin Costner, calm and composed despite being attacked, had simply refused to play her game. He hadn't yelled or cursed. He hadn't thrown anything or made threats. He had just stated his truth clearly and walked away with his dignity intact. Meanwhile, Lara was left sitting at that desk, off camera, facing the reality of what she'd done. The other hosts weren't defending her. The producers were pulling her off air. And somewhere out in the parking lot, Kevin Costner was driving away, probably feeling lighter than he had all morning. The makeup artist who had worked with Kevin earlier stood in the wings, shaking her head. The camera operators looked uncomfortable. Even the stage managers seemed tense. Everyone had seen it coming. Everyone had watched Lara's questions get sharper and meaner. Everyone had felt the mood in the room change. But nobody had been able to stop it. And now it was done. The interview was over, the guest was gone, and Good Morning America had just aired one of the most uncomfortable moments in its history. Robin finished reading the weather introduction, and the show cut to commercial again. The moment the red light on the camera turned off, she turned to Lara. "We need to talk about what just happened," Robin said quietly. "There's nothing to talk about," Lara replied, but her voice was shaky. "He overreacted." "No," Michael said firmly. "You crossed a line, multiple lines, and you need to own that." "I was doing my job," Lara insisted weakly. "Your job isn't to humiliate guests," Robin said. "Your job is to interview them, to have conversations, to make them feel welcome. You did the opposite of all that." Lara opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. For once, she had no comeback. No witty retort, no dismissive comment. She just sat there, as the truth of what had happened settled over her like a heavy blanket. The show continued. Segments came and went. Commercials played. But the energy in the studio was different now. Everyone was walking on eggshells. Everyone was thinking about what they'd witnessed. When the show finally ended, Robin and Michael took off their microphones and left the set without saying a word to Lara. The crew packed up equipment quietly. The producers disappeared into their offices for emergency meetings. And Lara sat alone at the desk, still in her chair, staring at nothing. Outside, the sun was shining. Traffic moved along the New York streets. People went about their day, many of them talking about what they'd just watched on television. Kevin Costner's phone was ringing non-stop. Other talk shows were calling. News outlets wanted statements. Everyone wanted to know his side of the story. But Kevin wasn't interested in prolonging the drama. He'd said what he needed to say. He'd stood up for himself. And now, he was moving on. Back at the studio, the reality was setting in. This wasn't going to go away quickly. The footage would be replayed over and over. People would analyze every word, every expression, every moment. And through it all, one thing was crystal clear. Kevin Costner had come to Good Morning America as a guest, expecting respect. Instead, he got attacked. And when he'd finally had enough, when he'd been pushed past his limit, he didn't lose his composure. He didn't stoop to the same level as his attacker. He simply stood up, spoke his truth, and walked away. Sometimes that's the most powerful response of all. Not fighting back with the same weapons, not getting down in the mud, just maintaining your dignity and removing yourself from a toxic situation. Lara had tried to make Kevin look small. She'd tried to diminish his career, his choices, his relevance. She'd thrown insult after insult, question after loaded question. But in the end, she was the one who looked small. She was the one who came across as petty and mean. She was the one sitting alone at that desk while her co-host walked away. The irony was almost poetic. In trying to tear Kevin down, she had only torn herself down. In questioning his relevance, she had made people question hers. Because viewers at home weren't talking about Kevin's career trajectory. They weren't discussing his box office numbers or his move to television. They were talking about how unprofessional Lara had been, how rude, how unnecessarily cruel. They were talking about how Kevin had handled himself with grace under pressure, how he'd stood his ground without being disrespectful, how he'd called out the behavior without name-calling or losing his temper. The good guy and the bad guy in this story were painfully obvious, and it wasn't the narrative Lara had intended to create. She had wanted to create a moment. She had wanted to ask bold questions and get reactions. She had wanted good television, and she'd gotten it. Just not in the way she expected, because the moment everyone would remember wasn't Kevin getting defensive or flustered. It was him standing up, maintaining his composure, and walking out the door. That was the moment. That was what people would talk about. The rest of the morning show's schedule was thrown off. Producers scrambled to figure out how to address what had happened. Executives started making phone calls. Legal teams got involved. But none of that changed what had aired live on national television. The words couldn't be taken back. The confrontation couldn't be erased. The damage was done. And somewhere in all of that chaos, there was a lesson about respect, about how you treat people, about the difference between asking tough questions and just being mean. Kevin Costner had taught that lesson simply by refusing to participate in his own humiliation, by saying no, by walking away. It was a masterclass in maintaining dignity under fire. And Lara Spencer, despite all her experience and her position behind that desk, had failed the test spectacularly. The cameras had caught it all, every uncomfortable second, every sharp word, every moment of tension building until it finally exploded, and now the whole world had seen it.